Welcome back to the deep dive. I want to start today by asking you, the listener, to check in with your body for a second. And I mean, seriously, literally check in. Think about the last time you opened a news app, or maybe you clicked on a trending topic on X or whatever social media you use, and you saw an opinion that was just the exact opposite of yours.
Oh, I know exactly where you're going with this.
Yeah.
I feel it already.
You do, right. It's not just an intellectual thought. It's not just, oh, I disagree with that policy. It's physical. It's a tightness in the chest. Maybe your stomach drops a little bit. Your heart rate actually goes up. It feels, well, it feels dangerous.
Right. It's the fight or flight response, literally. Your nervous system is reacting as if a tiger just walked into the room.
Exactly. And we're so used to hearing that this is just how politics is in the 21st century. We're told it's because of polarization or the algorithms or, fake news. And sure, those are the accelerants. But we have a stack of research today that suggests the fuel for this fire, the actual root cause, is something much, much deeper. It's about the very way we define who we are. It's about this concept we cling to called identity.
And here is where it gets fascinating and honestly a little confronting right out of the gate. The central thesis of the material we're diving into today, it's centered around an essay titled Idolatry of Identity. And it argues that the way we think about identity is actually a mistake. It's a category error.
The category error.
Yeah. It argues that we have taken these labels, race, party, nation, gender, and we've made them bear more weight than they can possibly hold. We have turned them effectively into idols.
Idolatry of identity. That's a heavy title. It sounds extremely biblical. And I have to ask right off the bat, isn't idolatry a bit of a loaded religious term for what is essentially a political and sociological discussion?
It is entirely intended to be loaded. The authors are using it very specifically. In a theological sense, an idol isn't just a golden calf. It's something finite that you treat as if it were infinite. It's something created that you worship as the creator.
Okay, finite treated as infinite.
Right. And the argument here is that we are in a crisis, not because we have identities, obviously we have them, but because we've elevated them to the status of gods. We look to our political tribes or our social labels for our salvation, our absolute worth, our ultimate meaning. And because they are just fragile, human-made constructs, they are cracking under the pressure.
That's the part I want to unpack right away. You said human-made constructs. Because it feels like who I am, my identity, is the most natural, ancient, rock-solid thing in the world. But you're saying, based on this research, that identity as we know it is actually a modern invention.
That is probably the biggest shocker in the research. We tend to think human beings have always walked around worrying about their identity. But the sources argue that a medieval peasant, or a member of a classical Islamic polity, or a Roman citizen, they didn't have an identity crisis in the way we do. They didn't have to go find themselves.
Wait, so if I'm a peasant in 12th century France, I don't have an identity.
Not in the modern sense. You have a role, you have a place. And that's the journey we're going on today. We are going to look at how we invented the modern self, how that invention has been weaponized into the polarization we hate, and then, and this is the really ambitious part of the deep dive, we're going to see if ancient religious traditions offer us a way out.
And just to be clear for the listener, because we're bringing up religion and ancient traditions, this isn't a sermon. We aren't here to convert anyone today.
Not at all. We are looking at these traditions, Islam, Hinduism, Jainism, Judaism, Christianity, as deep reservoirs of psychology and sociology. These are systems that have spent thousands of years thinking about the human ego, the self, and community. The argument is that they might have the intellectual tools to repair our broken politics, tools that secular liberalism just doesn't have in its current toolkit.
So the mission is to figure out why we are so angry at each other and how ancient wisdom might fix it. Let's start with that history lesson. You said identity is invented. Take us back to that medieval peasant.
Right. To understand this, we have to look at the work of the philosopher Charles Taylor. He wrote this massive, dense book called Sources of the Self. It's a complete doorstop, but it's brilliant. Taylor draws a fundamental distinction between the pre-modern self and the modern self.
Okay, set the scene for the pre-modern.
So imagine you are that peasant in 12th century France. You do not wake up in the morning wondering, who am I really? You don't take a personality test. You don't curate a bio. Your identity is given to you.
Given by whom?
By your circumstances. By your family, your guild, your village, and ultimately by the cosmos or God. You are the son of John, you are a blacksmith, you are a subject of the king, you are a child of the church. Your place in the hierarchy is fixed. It's external to you. Taylor calls this the porous self.
Porous, meaning things pass through it.
Yes, meaning you are open to the world. The meaning of your life comes from outside of you, from the spiritual world, from the community structure. You are a node in a network that already exists. You don't have to invent the network.
That sounds, well, on the one hand, incredibly restrictive. You're stuck. If you're born a blacksmith's son, you're a blacksmith. There's no
Yeah.
upward mobility, no following your dreams.
Absolutely. It was incredibly restrictive. But, and Taylor makes a huge point of this, it was also psychologically restful.
Restful.
Yes. You didn't have the anxiety of definition. You didn't have to constantly prove your existence or your validity because your existence was an objective fact of society. You fit.
Okay, I can see that. There's a certain safety in knowing your exact place. But we obviously don't live there anymore. We don't want to live there. What changed?
Modernity, the Enlightenment, the Romantic era. Taylor describes this massive shift as radical reflexivity.
Radical reflexivity. Break that down for us.
It's the turn inward. Think about Descartes, I think, therefore I am. Think about the Romantics who believed you had to find your unique inner voice. The source of meaning moves from the outside world, the stars, the king, the church, to the inside of your own head. The self becomes a project.
So instead of looking at the stars to know who I am, I look into my own feelings.
Precisely. And this is a massive shift in human history. Identity stops being something you receive and starts being something you construct. You have to discover your inner truth, interpret it, and then, and this is the crucial part for our politics, express it to the world.
Express yourself. That is the ultimate modern mantra.
It is. But this creates a totally new problem that the medieval peasant never had to deal with. Taylor calls it the politics of recognition.
Recognition. Okay, explain that mechanism. How does that work?
Well, think about it. If my identity is given by the village, if I am the blacksmith, I don't need you to validate me. Everyone sees the anvil, everyone knows who I am, it's an objective fact. But if my identity is something I discovered inside myself, something unique, personal, maybe a little fragile, then it's invisible to you unless I express it. And once I express it, I desperately need you to confirm it.
Yeah. So I need you to say, yes, I see you. Your identity is valid.
Exactly. If you ignore me or if you misrecognize me, if you use the wrong label or you mock my inner truth, it doesn't just feel like you're being rude. It feels like you are erasing my very existence. Taylor argues that because identity is now constructed internally, but formed in dialogue with others, we have developed an insatiable need for external validation.
That resonates so much with the social media age. It's not enough to just be something. I have to post about it. And if I post it and get 0 likes, or if people criticize it in the comments, I feel this crushing weight. It's not just embarrassment. It feels like an existential crisis.
It is exhausting. We've created a world where everyone is walking around holding a fragile glass sculpture of their own ego, basically begging everyone else not to drop it.
But hold on a second. Is this just about us being sensitive, snowflakes? Or is there something philosophical missing here? Because it feels like we've also lost the ability to even argue about what's good or bad in the public square.
You hit the nail on the head. That brings us to the second pillar of our history lesson here, the work of Alasdair MacIntyre and his book After Virtue. MacIntyre argues that the Enlightenment, that period where we embraced reason and science, actually broke our moral compass entirely.
How so? I thought the Enlightenment was supposed to liberate us from superstitions. Reason was supposed to fix everything, give us a solid foundation.
It tried to. The Enlightenment thinkers tried to base morality on pure reason alone. They wanted to discard the old superstitions about God or cosmic order, but MacIntyre says they failed because they discarded a vital concept called teleology.
Teleology, that comes from the Greek word telos, right? Meaning purpose.
Right. Telos means the end, or the goal, or the purpose of a thing. Let's use a really simple example. A watch. What is the telos of a watch?
To tell time accurately.
Correct. Because you know the telos of a watch, you can make an objective moral statement about it. You can say, this is a good watch if it keeps time, or this is a bad watch if it's slow. The goodness is defined by how well it fulfills its inherent purpose.
Okay, that makes total sense for a machine or a tool.
Well, in the pre-modern world, we believed human beings had a telos too. Maybe it was to glorify God, or to live in accordance with nature, or to serve the polis in ancient Greece. Because we had a shared definition of what a human was for, we could agree on what a good human was. We could agree on virtues.
But we don't agree on what humans are for anymore.
Exactly. Science doesn't do telos. Science tells you how the mechanism works, not what the purpose of the mechanism is. We discarded the idea of a shared purpose. So now we are left with moral rules. Don't kill, be free, treat people fairly, but we have no context for why. MacIntyre calls the result emotivism.
Emotivism. That sounds like acting on your emotions.
Yeah. Essentially, yes. It's the philosophical view that all moral claims like abortion is wrong, freedom is good, taxation is theft, are actually nothing more than expressions of personal preference. It's like saying, I like vanilla ice cream, but we dress it up in fancy language to sound like objective truth.
So when I say this policy is unjust, I'm not actually stating a fact about the universe. I'm just saying, boo, I don't like this.
According to McIntyre, that is exactly how our public discourse functions now. We shout justice and rights at each other, but because we have no shared standard of truth or purpose to adjudicate the argument, we are just shouting our emotional preferences.
And this connects back to identity how, exactly?
Well, if we can't agree on what is true or what is the purpose of life, we retreat to the only thing we have left: who I am. Identity replaces truth as the basis for political argument. I can't prove I'm right based on a universal standard, so I claim that my identity demands this view. As a blank, I believe this.
And if you disagree with me, you aren't just disagreeing with my logic. You are attacking me. You are attacking my existence.
Bingo! And that seems to be where all the anger comes from. If we're just debating tax rates and we both agree the goal is economic growth, that's a math problem. We can solve math. We can look at data. But if we're debating my identity, my existence, my recognition, that's a war.
And this brings us to the weaponization of identity. Because it's not just that we are isolated individuals wandering around with these fragile selves. We are clumping into tribes.
Huge tribes. This is where we get into the work of Liliana Mason, specifically her book Uncivil Agreement. I found this part of the deep dive totally fascinating because she uses hard data to explain why politics feels so much more toxic now than it did 50 years ago.
She uses the term social sorting, right?
Yes, social sorting.
Explain that, because I think people assume we've always been fiercely divided.
We have, but the structure of the division was entirely different. Imagine the U.S. in the 1960s or 70s. You might be a Republican, but you might also be a union member. You might be a Catholic living in the Northeast.
Okay, I'm picturing that guy.
Now, generally, unions leaned Democrat, but you're a Republican, so your identities are cross-cutting. You have friends at the union hall who are Democrats, but you agree on labor issues. You have friends at church who are Democrats, but you agree on theology. Your Republicanness was just one slice of your pie. It didn't consume the whole thing.
So I had social pressure to not hate Democrats because my bowling partner was a Democrat. We had other things keeping us together.
Exactly. You had overlapping circles of belonging. But Mason shows that over the last few decades, these identities have sorted. They have stacked up on top of each other.
Stacked up how? What does that look like today?
Today, if you tell me your political party, I can probably guess your religion, your race, whether you live in a city or the country, what kind of car you drive, and even what grocery store you shop at. The circles have all merged into one giant circle.
We've created what the source calls the mega-identity.
The mega-identity. And the stakes go through the absolute roof. Because now, if our party loses an election, it's not just that my taxes might go up. It feels like my religion, my culture, my race, and my geographic way of life have all been rejected by the country.
It feels like an existential referendum on me.
And the data backs this up in a terrifying way. There was a study by Iyengar and Westwood in 2015 that the source cites. They found that partisan discrimination in the U.S. now exceeds racial discrimination.
Wait, say that again? That is a massive claim. Partisan discrimination is higher than racial discrimination.
In experimental settings, yes. They gave people resumes to review for a scholarship or a job. They found that people were significantly more likely to discriminate against someone from the opposing political party than against someone of a different race.
That is wild. But if you think about it, we have very strong social norms that say, do not be racist. You get fired for being racist. But we have absolutely no social norms that say, don't hate the other political party.
In fact, you get rewarded for it. It's social currency. It's the last acceptable prejudice. It allows us to vent all that tribal aggression that we can't use elsewhere.
So we have these mega identities, and they are fueled by this insatiable need for recognition that Taylor talked about. Francis Fukuyama has a term for this in the research, right?
Yes. In his book Identity, he talks about thymos. It's a concept originally from Plato. It refers to the part of the soul that craves recognition and dignity. Fukuyama says there are two types. There is isothymia.
Isothymia, like an isosceles triangle. Equal.
Right. The desire to be recognized as equal. I am just as good as you. This is the basis of the civil rights movement, feminism, gay rights. It's the drive for equal dignity. And that's good. We want that in democracy.
But there's a dark side.
But Fukuyama warns that isothymia has a very dangerous tendency to slide into megalothymia.
Megalothymia, that sounds like a Godzilla villain.
It's the desire to be recognized as superior, to have your group acknowledged not just as equal, but as the best, the real Americans, the enlightened ones, the chosen ones. When you combine the mega-identity with megalithyia, you get a recipe for civil conflict. You get a zero-sum game where my dignity practically requires your humiliation.
And the irony, and this is the part that might upset some people, but we have to go there to understand the source material,
Right.
is that the things we are fighting over, these categories, might not even be as real as we think they are.
This is the core paradox of the whole thing. Kwame Anthony Appiah wrote a book called The Lies That Bind. He argues that we are ready to go to war for categories that are, in his words, riddled with contradictions. Take race, for example.
Right. Now, we have to be very careful here. Racism is incredibly real. The sociological effects of race are undeniably real.
Absolutely. Sociologically, historically, race is a massive reality with massive consequences. But Appiah is talking about biology and ontology. He points out a stunning fact. 90% of genetic variation in humans exists within racial groups, not between them.
Meaning, there's more genetic difference between two random white guys than between the average white guy and the average black guy.
Often, yes. Biologically, race is not a coherent category. It's a sloppy historical shorthand we invented based on superficial traits. Or take nationality. Most modern nations are very recent inventions, or religion traditions are internally fractured with thousands of sects. But we treat these fluid sociological constructions as if they are fixed, hard realities. We treat them as ontological, as the very ground of our being.
That's the idolatry part from the title. We've taken a costume that society handed us, and we've convinced ourselves it's our actual skin.
Precisely. We've forgotten that we made these categories up. And because we treat them as fixed gods, we are trapped in them. We worship the label.
So let's take a breath and look at the diagnosis we have so far. We have a modern self that is anxious, turned inward, and desperate for external validation. We have lost our shared moral language, so we just shout our feelings at each other. We have stacked our identities into megatribes, and we are worshiping these tribes as if they are the ultimate biological truth.
That is the incredibly bleak picture.
It is bleak. If this were a standard political show, this is where we would say, so vote for this candidate, they'll fix it, or pass this law. But the source material strongly suggests that politics cannot fix this, because politics is just the symptom. The cure has to go much deeper.
Into the spiritual and psychological.
Yeah. And again, not in a thoughts and prayers kind of way, but in a let's deconstruct the human psyche kind of way. The argument is that ancient spiritual traditions have actually known about this idolatry of the self for millennia.
They have. They've been essentially debugging the human operating system for 3,000 years, and they offer a profound corrective. If the problem is a rigid, constructed self that demands constant worship and validation, the solution is to realize that this rigid self is an illusion.
Let's start with the East.
Yeah.
I was really struck by the section on Islam in the research, specifically the Sufi tradition. They have a concept called the nafs.
The nafs, it's usually translated into English as the ego or the lower self. But what I love about the Sufi perspective is that the self isn't a statue. It isn't a fixed thing you have to defend. It's a process. It's incredibly fluid.
So I'm not just one thing forever. I don't have a true self I have to protect.
No. The Quran describes stages of the self. It's almost like a developmental ladder you climb. You start at the bottom with nafs al-amara.
The commanding self.
Right. This is the self that commands you to do evil or just gives in to base desires. It's pure impulse, pure ego. It's the toddler in your brain screaming, I want. It's the part of you that wants to dunk on someone on Twitter because it feels really good in the moment to be superior.
We've all been there. It does feel good in the moment.
We all live there sometimes. But then, ideally, you mature and move to nafs al-lawwama, the self-blaming conscience. This is when you realize you messed up. You feel guilt. You look at your own anger online and say, you know, that wasn't the real me. I can do better.
And the final goal?
The goal is to reach nafs al-mumayna, the soul, at peace. And ultimately, in Sufism, the ultimate spiritual goal is fana.
Fane. That translates to annihilation, right? That sounds terrifying to a modern person.
It sounds totally scary to the modern ear because we are so obsessed with preserving ourselves, recognizing ourselves. But fana isn't destruction in a violent or nihilistic sense. It's the passing away of the ego. It's the deep realization that I am not the center of the universe.
It's just getting over yourself.
Exactly. William Chittick, who is a great scholar of Sufism, has this wonderful quote in the material. Each moment of the self is unique. It liberates you. If the self is fluid, changing every single moment in relation to God and the world, then you don't have to defend a giant, rigid fortress of me.
That is actually very freeing. If I mess up or if someone attacks my identity, I can say, well, that was just a fleeting state. That label isn't my soul. I don't have to burn the world down to defend it.
It loosens the grip of the idol. It turns the idol back into dust. Now, Hinduism does something very similar, but it uses a different metaphor. The costume.
The actor and the role. This comes from the Gita, doesn't it?
Yes, the Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads, they draw a very sharp, clear distinction between the Atman, the eternal self, the unchanging spark of the divine inside you, and the empirical self.
The empirical self being your body, your caste, your job, your gender, your political party.
Exactly. And the empirical self, the political party, the job, the social status, that's all part of Maya.
Maya. Illusion.
Maya. Illusion. Now, illusion doesn't mean it doesn't exist. The traffic jam is real. The election is real. It means it's not the ultimate reality. It's a cosmic play. Imagine you are a method actor on Broadway. You're playing a king. You wear the crown. You give the orders. You feel the power of the scene. But deep down, you have to know, I am not actually the king. I am the actor playing the king. I have to take the crown off and go home.
But in our modern politics, we've completely forgotten we're actors. We think the costume is super glued to our skin.
We think we are the role. And that's exactly why we fight so viciously. Because if the costume is all I have, if my political label is my entire existence, then an attack on the costume is a lethal attack on my existence. If my party loses the election, I psychologically die.
So the spiritual practice here is to wake up on stage.
To wake up and realize, I am playing the role of a Democrat, or I am playing the role of a conservative, and I will play it well. I will fight for justice as I see it. But I know that the person across the stage from me, the quote-unquote villain, is also just an actor. They have the same eternal Atman.
The Gita has a beautiful line about this, the equal vision.
Yes. It says the wise person sees with equal vision a Brahmin, a priest, a cow, an elephant, or a dog-eater, which means an outcast. They see the exact same divine spark in all of them, regardless of the costume they are wearing in this life.
That is radical equality. But let's be perfectly honest here. It's really hard to look at a political troll on the internet, someone saying vile things, and see a divine spark.
It's incredibly hard. That's why it's called a spiritual discipline and not a weekend hobby. It goes against our tribal nature. Now, if we want a practical tool for how to actually talk to that troll or talk to someone we fiercely disagree with, Jainism is the absolute gold standard in the research.
Jainism. These are the folks who are strictly nonviolent, right?
Yeah.
They wear masks sometimes to avoid inhaling and killing microscopic insects.
Yes, ahimsa, perfect nonviolence, is their core tenet. But the source material highlights something brilliant they developed called intellectual ahimsa.
Intellectual nonviolence. I love that concept. Let's dig into that.
It's based on a philosophical doctrine called Anekantavada. Did I pronounce that right?
You sounded very confident, so let's go with yes, Anekantavada.
It translates to the many-sidedness of truth. The classic analogy they use, which you've probably heard, is the blind man and the elephant.
Right. One touches the trunk and says truth is a snake. One touches the leg and says truth is a tree. One touches the ear and says truth is a fan.
Exactly. They are all right based on their experience, but they are all wrong about the whole. Jains believe that reality is so massive and so complex that no single human view can possibly capture it all. Only a fully enlightened being, a Kevalin, can see the whole truth at once. For the rest of us, our view is always inherently partial.
So how does a Jain argue politics then? Do they just say, well, everything is true, there is no right answer? That sounds like relativism.
No, they aren't relativists. They use a system of logic called sadvada. It means conditional predication. Basically, every statement you make should have an invisible asterisk next to it that says, from a certain perspective.
So instead of saying, the economy is failing, which is an absolute dogmatic statement,
you would say, from the perspective of a wage earner in the manufacturing sector, the economy is failing. And someone else might say, well, from the perspective of a tech shareholder, the economy is booming.
and both are true.
Both are true. Neither is the whole truth. They are facets of the diamond.
If we actually spoke like that, cable news would cease to exist entirely. Tonight on Primetime. From a certain perspective, the other side has a valid point. The ratings would plummet to zero.
They would absolutely plummet. But think about the profound epistemic humility that requires. It frames dogmatic attachment to your own view as a form of actual violence. To claim, I possess the absolute final truth and you are absolutely 100% wrong, is to do violence to the complexity of reality.
That is a powerful reframe. Dogma as violence. So we have this massive deconstruction of the ego from the Eastern traditions. Sufism says the self is fluid. Hinduism says it's just a costume. Jainism says your truth is only partial. But there's another side to this puzzle. Because if you just deconstruct everything, you might end up with nihilism. You still need to build something back up.
Right. We don't just need to humble ourselves. We need to actively honor the other person. We need a solid basis for human dignity. And this is where the Western Abrahamic traditions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, really shine in the source material. They give us an undeniable reason to respect the person we disagree with, even if we think they're dangerously wrong.
Let's talk about the Jewish concept of the image of God.
B'Tselem Elohim. It comes from Genesis 1.27. God created man in his own image. This is the absolute bedrock of Western human rights, even if our secular society often forgets the theological root of it. It means that every single human being, regardless of their utility, their intelligence, their wealth, or their politics, has infinite value.
Because they bear the stamp of the Creator. And the Talmud raises the stakes on this even higher.
The Talmud says one who destroys a single life, it is as if he destroyed an entire world. Think about the gravity of that. Every person is a universe.
Leo Beck, the great Jewish thinker, had a specific insight on this regarding diversity and how we view each other.
Yes. He wrote that above all castes, classes, and nations stands one certainty: man, or humanity. But the specific, brilliant Jewish genius here is holding the tension between the particular and the universal.
What do you mean by that tension? The particular versus universal?
Well, Judaism is a tribal religion. It's a covenant with a very specific people, the Jews. They have particular laws, particular lands, particular traditions. But the theology affirms the universal dignity of everyone, regardless of whether they are in that covenant or not. It says, I can be deeply, passionately committed to my tribe, but I must also recognize the infinite worth of the stranger.
That feels like exactly the balance we are completely missing right now. We either have people who are all tribe and they hate the stranger, or we have people who want to be enlightened global citizens, but they have no local roots, no tribe at all.
Exactly. Judaism models how to be both. You have a distinct home, you love your home, but you deeply respect the neighbor.
Christianity takes this universalism and really blasts it out to the empire. There's that famous verse in Galatians the source mentions.
Galatians 3.28. There is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, there is no male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus.
Now, I've heard intense arguments about this verse. Is Paul saying those categories literally don't exist anymore? Is he being colorblind or genderblind? Because saying there is no male and female seems biologically, obviously untrue.
It's a great question, and it gets debated a lot, but most scholars argue he's not saying they physically vanish. He's not saying differences aren't real or don't shape our lives. He's saying they are secondary. They are no longer the fundamental standing of a person before God or the community.
Context really matters here, right? Because of Rome.
Huge context. In the Roman world, being a slave or free was absolutely everything. It determined if you were a human person with rights or literally a talking farm tool. Being Jew or Greek determined your entire legal and social status. Paul is saying, no, those labels are surface level. Your ultimate worth is determined by something that transcends those labels. He is relativizing the entire social hierarchy of the Roman Empire.
So, to apply it today, Democrat or Republican might describe how I vote, but it doesn't describe my ultimate worth as a human being.
Exactly. It renders the political label penultimate. It's important, but it's not the ultimate truth about you. The mega identity gets demoted.
And Islam has a beautiful parallel to this in the Quran regarding why diversity even exists in the first place.
Surah 49.13. It says, we made you into nations and tribes so that you may know one another.
Litarafu.
Yes, litarafu. The idea is that diversity isn't a mistake. It isn't a bug in the system. It's a deliberate feature. God didn't make us different so we would fight and sort into megatribes, but so we would learn. If everyone was exactly the same, there would be no knowing. There would be no friction, no curiosity, no growth.
And there's that Islamic concept of fitra, too, which I find really hopeful for the idea of a secular democracy.
Fitra is the primordial nature. Think of it as the factory settings of the human soul. Abdulaziz Sakadina, a major scholar in this field, argues that fitra is what actually allows us to have a functioning pluralistic society.
How so? How does fitra help us politically?
Because fitra implies that every single human being has a God-given moral compass. Even if you are an atheist and I am a Muslim, or you are a hardcore Republican and I am a progressive Democrat, We both have this innate capacity for reason, for conscience, for knowing right from wrong.
So we aren't total aliens to each other, even across massive divides.
We aren't aliens. We share a common language of moral justification that exists before our religious or political labels even enter the picture. We can reason together because we come from the exact same source code.
So let's bring all these threads together. The Eastern traditions tell us, hey, your ego is a costume, don't worship it. The Western traditions tell us, hey, that person you hate is made in the image of God. Treat them with ultimate dignity.
That's the theory: deconstruction of the idol and restoration of true dignity.
But now we have to land the plane. How do we actually do this? How do we build a modern, functioning society on this? Because right now, it feels like we are ripping apart at the seams. And telling people to see the image of God in a Twitter troll is a very tall order, especially on election day.
It is a massive order. And this brings us to the final piece of our source material and the profound work of the late great Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. He was a total giant in this field. He wrote a book called The Dignity of Difference.
Great title, by the way.
It's a wonderful book. And in it, he makes a crucial distinction that I think perfectly explains why our current politics is failing so miserably. He distinguishes between a social contract and a social covenant.
Okay, political science nerds, wake up. This is your moment. Contract versus covenant. Break it down for us.
A social contract, which is what modern liberal democracy is entirely built on, going all the way back to Hobbes and Locke and Rousseau, is fundamentally transactional. It's a business deal.
Meaning, I give you something, you give me something.
Meaning, I pay my taxes, the government fixes the road, I obey the law, the state protects my private property. It is completely based on mutual self-interest. I do this so that you do that.
That pretty much describes most of my interactions with the state.
Right. And Sachs says the contract is necessary. You absolutely need it to run a state, collect taxes, and pave roads. But it is entirely insufficient to run a society. Because what happens when the deal goes bad?
If the government stops fixing the road, I want to stop paying. If the deal isn't working for me anymore, I want out of the contract.
Exactly. It's fragile. If the society is just based on interests, and as soon as our interests diverge, which they inevitably will,
Right.
we are enemies. We have nothing holding us together. A covenant, however, is completely different.
How so? What is a covenant?
A covenant is relational. It's transformative. Think of a healthy marriage. A marriage isn't, or at least it shouldn't be, a contract where I will wash the dishes only if you mow the lawn, and if you don't, the marriage is void. It's much deeper. It's, I am bound to you. Your fate is my fate. I am loyal to this bond regardless of whether it is currently convenient for my self-interests.
For better or for worse?
Exactly. A covenant creates a we. A contract just manages a bunch of isolated I's. Sachs argues that in the modern West, we have moved from a politics of solidarity, which is covenant, to a politics of identity, which is contract. We basically view the country as a giant hotel where we are all just trying to get the best room service for our specific tribe, rather than a home that we actively build and maintain together.
So we urgently need to recover covenantal thinking. But does that mean we all have to believe the exact same thing? Because that sounds a lot like assimilation, which people rightly push back against.
No, and this is Sachs' true brilliance here. He calls for integration without assimilation.
Explain the difference between those two.
Assimilation is the classic melting pot. You throw everyone in, turn up the heat, and they melt into one uniform sludge. You lose your distinctiveness, your heritage, your specific beliefs. Sachs says, no. Monotheism, the belief in one God, does not mean monism, the belief in only one valid path or one uniform way to be human. The Creator actually loves diversity. You can be fully Jewish, fully Muslim, fully Texan, fully Californian. You absolutely keep your distinct identity.
So I get to keep my costume.
You keep your costume. It's a beautiful costume. But you are bound to the whole society in a way that supersedes your private interest. You are committed to the relationship, to the covenant, more than you are committed to winning every single argument.
That sounds incredible in theory, but it also sounds really hard in practice. Is there any empirical evidence that this actually works? Or is it just nice philosophy?
There is actual evidence. The source points to research by scholars like Ibra Patel and Mohammed Abu-Nimer. They study interfaith engagement and conflict resolution on the ground.
And what do they find when they put these groups together?
They find that when people actually engage across lines of difference, but not just sitting in a conference room debating theology, because that usually goes nowhere and just entrenches people.
Right. Debates just trigger the megalothemia.
Exactly. But when they engage by actually working on a shared project, building a Habitat for Humanity house together, running a local food bank, cleaning up a park.
Shared action.
Shared action toward a common good. When they do that, the research shows they develop shared moral frameworks. They build a covenant, and they don't lose their religion in the process. A Christian often becomes a better Christian by working alongside a Muslim because they are challenged to actually live up to their own charitable values. But the crucial shift is that the other stops being an existential threat.
It's the contact hypothesis, right? It's really hard to hate people close up.
It's practically impossible to hate people when you are sweating alongside them, passing them a hammer. The abstraction falls away, the mega identity crumbles. You stop seeing a representative of the evil opposing party and you just see Dave. Just Dave, who is bad at using a hammer but tells good jokes. And that mundane connection is the literal beginning of a covenant.
You know, this whole deep dive has been quite a journey. We started with that physical tightness in our chest, the deep anxiety of the modern self scrolling through social media. We looked at how we turned identity into an idol, demanding constant recognition. And we ended up with Rabbi Sachs basically telling us to get married to our neighbors.
It is a lot of ground to cover, but I think the core takeaway, despite all the heavy philosophy, is actually quite simple.
Summarize it for us. What is the one thing the listener should take away from all this source material?
The idolatry of identity is making us completely miserable. We are worshiping labels and categories that we invented ourselves. The way out of this trap is not to pretend we don't have identities. We do, and they matter. They shape our lives. The way out is to just hold them lightly.
I see them as costumes.
To see them as costumes. To practice the intellectual humility of the Jains, knowing our truth, is always partial. To see the image of God like the Jews and Christians, knowing the other person is fundamentally sacred. And to see the fluid process like the Sufis, knowing that we are always changing, moment to moment.
And to realize that the person shouting at you on Twitter is also just a person in a costume. Probably really scared, probably looking for validation and recognition, just like you are.
Precisely. We are all just seeking dignity.
Here is a provocative thought to leave you with, to mull over on your own. The source suggests that all idols, eventually, must be transcended. If we can actually do this, if we can look at our own political party, our own tribe, our most cherished labels and say, this is important to me, but it's not God, we might actually find the freedom to connect with the human being behind the label. And maybe, just maybe, the cost of that freedom is admitting we don't have it all figured out.
And that epistemic humility might literally be the only way we survive this century together.
A huge challenge. But hey, that's exactly why we dive deep.
We certainly do.
Thanks for joining us for this one. Let us know. Are you ready to take off the costume? Even just a little bit. We'll see you next time.